everyone, my name is Tina, and welcome to my Genshin channel. What is life? Why are we alive? And what happens after death? Just a few simple questions to discuss in today's video. During the Luna 7 Archon quest, we finally officially met a new harbinger, Pantalone, while we said goodbye, this time maybe for real, to another one, Dottore. Their story is interesting in a lot of ways, but personally, what fascinated me was how they both were pursuing immortality for completely different reasons, with completely different methods. To understand their perspective and to have a nice structure in this video, I want to start at the beginning, sometime after the cataclysm. There was a boy born to a merchant family somewhere in Sumeru called Zandik. He showed signs of brilliance pretty early on, however, likely due to his insanity and disregard of human life, he got chased out of his hometown. This didn't stop Zandik, as already at the age of 18, he was studying at the academia, but even there he felt out of place. His interest lied in what the academia, being now after the cataclysm, considered forbidden, and because of that, he was rejected by people the second time. Upon hearing about a young prodigy, who Sumeru labeled a heretic and expelled, Piero, director of the Fetui, searched him up and offered a seat for him as the second of the Fetui harbingers. The funds and resources from them jump-started Zandik's researches, as later our Dottore mentions. He was all good. However, while the prodigy Zandik was living his best life, about 13 years after Zandik's birth, there was another boy born somewhere in Chesnaya. Unlike Dottore, who I assumed was in a well-off merchant family, he grew up poor. Also unlike Dottore, he wanted a vision, but seeing this unfair environment, the young Feofan Sergeyevich Vexel very soon aligned himself against Celestia and made it his life goal to take control away from them. If you already beat the new weekly boss, there is a small chance you might have seen a bonus item in your inventory called Anomalous Stream Arrow. There are 3 different nodes you can get, and taking it upon myself, I used all my 5 accounts to gather every last piece of it, so finally, time to talk about why they are so important. In the first document, we see notes from experiments that Zandik, as well as later the segments did. Among them, we see specimen 3, male 20 years, later revealed to be Feofan, also known as Pantalone. I mentioned earlier he was about 13 years younger than Dottore. If you do the calculations from this page, you can pinpoint the timeline pretty well. 20-year-old Feofan at this point already failed the business and was sold as a test subject. That's how he got in contact with Zandik, but miraculously, he survived the experiment that left all of the subjects dead. 6 years later, his path crossed Zandik again after Feofan visited the doctor with a gunshot wound, a rare problem for a clerk. Zandik was already in the Fetui at this time, and sometime in the next 4 years, he introduced Feofan to the Fetui, since during the next visit, now at age 30, he was already Pantalone, the regulator. Also during these 4 years, some kind of a surgery was performed on him. Maybe that was in connection with the Fetui, or just the fact that after joining the Fetui, Pantalone became a heavy smoker. During his next visit at the age of 38, Pantalone was already getting doses of what later became the Elixir of Immortality. However, this was the last entry from Zandik, who, once again without the calculation, should have been about 51 years at this point. This is about the time when Zandik realized the elixir is not working for him and started making his segments. During Pantalone's next visit, at the age of 56, he was already treated by one of the segments, 25. What's funny is that this entry reveals Pantalone started smoking at the age of 26, so that is about the time when he joined the Fetui. Then, next entry shows Pantalone being 72, and this is another important part for our calculations, since this time around, segment 35, or Dottore, already talks about Zandik's autopsy, who died at 85. This is where the about 13 years of gap comes from. The elixir is now having its 5th trial, and signs are looking good. Pantalone is kept at a 45-year-old's physical state. I won't go into every single entry, just a few tidbits. Like at the age of 103, he refused a stomach transplant, but a bit later, at the age 175, he did get a lung transplant. At age 220, he decreased his daily 6 from 20 to only a merely 10, and a year later, at age 221, he received a complete psychological restitution. At the age of 359, he got a liver transplant after being poisoned, and finally, at age 400, the last entry in this document shows that every single segment mentioned so far did an examination on the effects of the Elixir of Immortality, and it seemed like working. After that, segment 35 declared that no further update is needed in this multi-segment log, but this tells us Pantalone is about 400 years old, so he has been around basically ever since the Cataclysm. Given how the original Zandik was expelled for forbidden Karian researches, I think it's fair to say he's in between 400 and 500 years old. Now that we know his story as well, it's time to reveal more about the segments that Zandik made according to the timeline around in his 60s. Thanks to the Fetui's funds, he was able to make 6 segments, though the exact number is unknown. It's only that we've seen 6 in the new cutscene, and there were only 6 mentioned in the new notes. It's worth to note, when segment 35 deleted the others, there were 7 voices heard, but could be some segments had multiple lines, so I think for now I'll just go with the 6 we know. Going by age, the first segment is 8 at 8 years old. He's the most obvious to pinpoint, being by far the youngest, but why would Zandik make an 8-year-old segment? At least according to his experimental proposal, there are certain things only children can see, including Aranara, for potentially Aranara experiments. Young Zandik seems like was already pretty insane. After all, the segments captured him at certain ages, and it's understandable why he was chased away from his hometown then. Then, segment 18 is also most likely an easy guess, being the young scholar who was just expelled from the academia, even shown in the cutscene, though that being the actual 18-year-old Zandik. Going by the same logic of Zandik looking like the segments of that age, which I think is a fair assumption, segment 25 is likely a researcher looking like Zandik at the time of him joining the Fetui and really starting his crazy experiments. One small thing that might go against that is how in one dialogue we can read other harbingers couldn't really tell apart 25 from 35 or Dottore, but I guess it could be he took on different clothing for that occasion. In the third note, that I will talk about later, we can even read how 25 cast a sidelong glance at 35, which would be hard through an eye mask, so I think I'm right in this order. Nonetheless, the next in line is segment 35, the one we know the most about, known as Dottore, the Omega build. He was the one always going to Fetui meetings, even when Zandik was still alive, since Zandik had motion sickness on trains, so he just sent 35 instead. I don't think we need much introduction to him, so let's move on to segment 45, who I assume is the one looking most similar to 35, with a little bigger coat on him. I know, all harbingers have their own harbinger clothing, but even then, I'm pretty sure 45 was the one appearing in Winter Night's Lazo. It was him who was confused how to address Columbina, and Columbina did notice it was not the usual Dottore, asking him about the prime of his life, that being 35. This is also likely the segment who left Sumeru, while 35 stayed in Sumeru. Finally, 65 is an easy guess as well, the one with a pretty cool looking plague mask, who was at the time already using a cane. He was said to be the closest to Zandik too, which I guess makes sense, since Zandik made the segments around this age, meaning 65 is the most aligned with the entire segment family idea, and of course, he was the closest to him in age as well. But with that, we are now caught up with Dottore's life. Truly, segment 35 was the most selfish, the one we heard about the most, and he even left us a final note, walking us through the events we already knew. It talks about the moment Pierre revealed the false guy's secret, which is interesting because now we know it was him who got the information, and it was Dottore's idea to use this info later as leverage. This is exactly what happened when the info was exchanged for Nagida's dendronosis, and to maybe even his surprise, the other harbingers basically agreed it was a fair exchange. From this part, I want to highlight how Dottore mentions the third descender was erased for violating the one rule, though the method of that erasure remains a mystery. I really wonder what that one rule is, since opening of the gates to Abyss did happen quite a few times in Tibet's history, but the wording Dottore used is quite curious too. Erased is a pretty heavy word, and similar in other languages too. It's mostly the word you use for erasing pencil marks, erasing data from your computer, and such. It kind of feels like Irmin's soul might have been involved in it too, rest in peace, and the fact not even the Fetui knows about the methods of that just makes it even more suspicious. This will 100% come up when we learn more about the era of the Voyager and the Third Descender, but for now, just keep that in mind, because we definitely know the least about the Third Descender, who might even have something to do with Tsaritsa. Moving forward in this note, however, we also learn why the animal soul exchange experiment was conducted earlier. This was to test how Dottore will merge his soul back together, all planned out, meaning he was actually ready to die and not cry. His plan succeeded, to be fair, being merged with the deposited data he left at the Northland Bank, and it was only by Nohida's intervention that he was defeated, which even Dottore admitted was something he was not ready for. So, what will the future hold? In a weird way, Pantalone and Dottore couldn't be further from each other. One's goal being the freedom of the individual, he himself wanting to live longer, while the other's goal being humanity's freedom from celestial shackles, and his ideas to keep on living, no matter in what flesh. But these two still partnered up, still worked together, since in the end, they both wanted a form of immortality, and both wanted to take their fate back from Celestia. In a way, that means, for now, both succeeded. Dottore himself said death doesn't really bother him, since he was able to perform this experiment, and he somewhat got what he wanted. Nohida did say fate is now unlocked, at least to a degree, and we know from Barbelot she cannot really sense fate at the moment, even if because of the whole moon fiasco, I think that's just a little bit of a cop-out until we truly see the consequences of Irmin's soul being gone in Chesnaya. As for Pantalone, his elixir supplier is dead, but he still have a few more years to figure out what to do, and that risk might be worth for him, because remember, Nohida couldn't find the pyronosis at the tree. Her analysis of the situation was that it likely disappeared after using it. Mavuika said she couldn't feel it anymore as well, but keep in mind that might be because of the phlogiston in it was used up, like how it kept the sacred flame going, something Mavuika could sense. Depleted from its phlogiston power, there is still someone who I think would happily take it, that someone being, of course, Tsaritsa, as this is the last piece she needs for her big project. Honestly, during the quest, I thought this was Project Stuja, since mistletoe being a parasite of trees was mentioned a lot in connection with it, but I guess I was wrong on that front, and unless Tsaritsa has multiple projects, Stuja is possibly about the Gnosis, which should begin the moment we step on Chesnayan soil. Pantalone watching the tree burning down likely wasn't a coincidence either. I'm pretty sure he was there to retrieve it, but we'll see that in about 3 months. And finally, to end this video with a crazy theory that I unfortunately start to kinda believe in, what if this is still not the end of Dottore? Of course, I'm talking about the infamous lizard theory. In case you don't know, people noticed a certain lizard appearing for a very long time during the start of Luna 4's Archon quest, and this same lizard with the red eyes appeared a lot during Luna 7 as well. He was there peeping on Aru in very weird positions, absolutely deliberately put there, and he was even picked up when talking about how King Deshret wanted to create a new world and how Nobu brought forbidden knowledge for him. The same lizard also appeared at the border when the events should have been outside Irminso's reach, and what started me to believe this theory was that back in 3.3, when talking about the events of Tatarasuna, Niva held up a lizard out of nowhere just when Escher, who we know was Dottore, appeared in the story. Of course, the entire Escher storyline was briefly brought up again last patch in the Temple of Space, but be it the real Escher, be it Dottore somehow still surviving, I just cannot stop thinking about how his story is not over. Furthermore, randomly, Dottore also mentioned how in case his soul was gone, he could still be recreated with Pantalone's memories of him, merging with Pantalone's intact soul, which also kind of feels like how the sibling made new Karya, a storyline which of course is not finished either, so there's still a lot of story left on the table, and that was already a lot of yapping on my part. I will end the video now, but I couldn't gloss over this theory. I had to include it at the end. We are nearing Notcry's end, however, we still have one region left there to complete the statue. Our mystery character should be revealed
already. Video soon.
And even in this patch, we still have a lot to talk about, including new Chesnaya lore from the Disenchantment and Deep Shadows artifact set. Let me know if there is any particular topic you would like to see more of. But until then, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give a like, and if you see more content like this, then make sure to subscribe. I was Sumeru Genshin channel, and see you in the next one. Bye bye!